Hey, what's up, guys? It's Jordan with the Laundromat Resource Podcast. This is show 156, and I'm pumped you're here today because today we have on the show Stephen Gramaglia, and this episode is jam-packed. We're going to talk about things like buy versus build. If you're thinking about building a laundromat from scratch, what kinds of things you need to keep in mind, what things you need to know. We're going to talk about leases. We're going to talk about hiring. This one is literally, it's jam-packed with a ton of just specific, detailed information there. So anyways, you're going to love this episode. And I do want to jump into that with Stephen here in a second. But real quick, just wanted to say, we just launched 4 new mastermind groups. And I'm telling you, these are game changers over there. And I had a consulting call just this morning, and he was raving about his mastermind group and about how that group has been helping each other, all current owners. And he's about to close on a deal in about a week from now. And it was just getting so much information and insight. And there's just so much good stuff being shared. Even like specific details like, hey, get light housing when you replace your lights, just get all new light housing and the exact ones to get all that. Just so much cool stuff he was telling me about. And I was like, this is what gets me pumped up. So anyways, the pro community over there comes with mastermind groups. It's a no-brainer in my mind. If you are interested in getting involved with a mastermind group, a group of people just like you who either own laundromats or who are trying to buy their first laundromat to help you get there faster and get further, then check out laundromatresource.com/pro. Okay. I didn't want to take too much time on that, but I'm just so excited about how some of these mastermind groups are going that I want to make sure that anybody who has an opportunity out there, or who wants an opportunity to get in one, has that opportunity. So the way you find out more details about it, go to laundromatresource.com/events and check out when the next mastermind induction night will be. And also we've got a ton of Q&As coming up over the next couple of weeks. So, hey, come join us at those Q&As. Again, laundromatresource.com/events. All those will be on the calendar. And hopefully we'll see you guys there. All right, let's jump into it with Stephen right now. Stephen, thank you for coming on the show, man. How you doing today?
Doing great. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Oh man, thanks for coming on the show. I'm super excited because I know you've done some pretty cool stuff all around this industry, but specifically in your stores that you've got, which we're going to jump into. But I just got to point out, we've got a little bit of the East Coast, West Coast rival thing going on here with the New York to California thing. So, if we're bumping heads over here, just know that West Coast is the best coast. That's all I wanted to start the same.
No, we're gonna keep it civil. We're not gonna get into a rap battle here. It's gonna be fine. Right. We're gonna work it out, and at the end, I think we'll see eye to eye.
All right. Okay. I like that. Well, hey man. Again, thanks for coming on the show. I'm really excited. So why don't you start with who are you, and then how did you get into this industry?
Sure. So Stephen Gramaglia. Owner operator, Clean Fresh Laundromats. We've got 3 laundromats currently. We're in New York, so we have 2 stores in Manhattan in the Big Apple, and we've got 1 store in Yonkers, New York, which is the first immediate town. It's a city, but the first immediate geography north of New York City. So it's pretty close in terms of proximity, close to where I live. So that's also helpful. So 3 stores currently, and a little bit about my background. So, I worked at Eastern Funding for 21 years. I was there for a very long time. Was there not at the beginning, but I was there in its infancy, and took the company from a very, very small niche finance company into a pretty large 70 employees when I left. Great company to work with, great company to work for. Did a lot of cool stuff, learned a lot about the industry in my capacity there. Saw a lot of laundromats, a lot of laundromats all over the country, and some actually outside the country. My wife was always happy when we'd go on vacation somewhere, and the first thing we would do when we get to an island somewhere is go find a laundromat, take a picture. I think a lot of operators can actually can relate to that. I think it's like a disease that
It
is
is a
very
disease.
common in
Yeah.
the industry. Wherever
Yeah.
you go, you're searching for laundromats. So got to work with some great operators over the years, distributors, manufacturers. Learned all aspects of the business, with one exception. Never learned how to actually operate a laundromat. So I learned how to look at financials. I learned a lot about leases. I learned a lot about utilities, about layouts and demographics and pro formas. But when you actually are the boss and you're in charge of a space with people in it and equipment, that's a different story. And we'll get into that. That's for a little bit down the line. But yeah, so I love the industry. I love the people. I love the small business aspect of it, um, and I always kind of thought I wanted to do it and own my own shop, but it never really happened. It never panned out. I was busy with Eastern and with raising kids and doing all that stuff. And as I have two boys who are 20 and 22 now, but when they started to get towards high school age, my wife and I started thinking about, what do we want to do, and where do we want to go, and we started talking about a natural fit would be, buying or building a small laundromat, and she would kind of run it, or we would run it together. I would stay at Eastern, and we kept looking, couldn't find anything. And then in 2019, um, a local distributor who was actually a very good friend of mine called me up and he said, "Hey, I've got a location for you in Yonkers. It's not far from where you live, but it's not small." So that was the caveat, is it's not small. So went and looked at it. It's the end cap of a shopping center, a really good shopping center, main road, 4 lanes in each direction, stoplight at the shopping center, good anchor. It's got a CVS as an anchor, Chuck E. Cheese, and an Outback Steakhouse. And then it's got the typical shopping center co-tenants, a little nail salon, a little grocery, uh, uh, a couple of other types of small businesses there. But we had the end cap, and I think honestly that our space is the best space in that shopping center. Great parking. It just checked all the boxes with the exception of it's not a small first time owner situation.
Mhm.
So 2019, we looked at it. We had signed the lease. Somebody else had actually already wanted that space, a different operator for a laundromat, ran into a lot of problems with the city of Yonkers and abandoned the project. Said, "Hey, I got to get out of this. The city of Yonkers is very, very challenging to deal with." And so we went into it knowing that there were already challenges with the city, with permitting, with all the stuff. So um, we jumped in, started doing it, got it going. We were supposed to open before COVID hit. That didn't happen. A lot of delays, a lot of issues with the city. And then once COVID hit, my wife and I were talking. We said, "Look, this is a big store. It's 5,500 square feet. It's a very big, it's a large store. 130, well, when we opened, it had 130 machines. We have more now. And we kind of made the decision, like, this was good timing for me to exit out of Eastern. We're going to jump into this, both of us, at the same time, and we're going to make it work." And we did, and we finally got open in May 9th of 2020 is when we opened our door. Full COVID protocols, mask, gloves, social distancing, people in their cars waiting, the whole thing. So it was a really interesting time to do it. The positives to it were it was a big, huge, spacious facility, brand new, uh, with great technology in terms of the text alerts where people could wait in their car, throw their wash in, get a text alert, their wash is done, come in, throw their stuff in the dryer. So social distancing, people were, very nervous, but it was a very nice setup for us, and it was great timing. And the competition where we are, is like non-existent. I mean, there are stores all around, but they're smaller. They're typical zombie mats. They're, you know, not sanitary. They're not clean. You know, the typical what you get in a lot of
Mhm.
places. So
Mhm.
it was just an opportune time for us to do it. And you know, it was just, there was a lot of good to it. We had some challenges in terms of we had to pay a lot of rent while we were not open, so that was a challenge. But there was nothing we could do about it at that point. So the budget got sort of blown out just by us not being able to open for so long. Um, so obviously that was a challenge. And so, yeah, so fast forward to today, we've got 3 stores, my wife and I full time, and got a great business going.
Awesome. Okay. We got a lot to unpack there, and then we got to
Yeah, no,
get
I
into
know.
those other 2 stores too. And I mean, I think this episode is going to be great because I mean, we talked, before, and I know a little bit about what you got going on, right? So we're going to talk about building, we're going to talk about buying, and we're going to talk about building again, and do some comparisons to get your perspective on buying versus building, or building the first time versus the second time. We want to get into all that. But let's back up just a little bit. And okay, first of all, terrifying to be opening a large laundromat right after COVID strikes. And especially because I mean, I think New York probably got hit the hardest, and obviously New York City, um, even more so, but New York probably got hit the hardest when it comes to COVID. Did how are you feeling when you're getting ready to open these doors and all this COVID stuff was going on? Were you nervous about that? And did you do anything to sort of prepare for that?
Yeah, we were petrified. I mean, this was a big store, 130 machines. I mean, it was a big investment. And obviously we didn't know COVID was coming when we started it in
Right.
2019. So, but we were fully invested, financially, mentally, and everything. And we just said, we're going to make it work. And we tried to sort of block out the noise regarding COVID and said, we're going to open it. We're going to keep it spotless. And we wound up, it was actually a blessing for the community, honestly, because everybody that came said, wow. I mean, wow, we have to do laundry, right? It's essential. We've got to do it. We've got no choice. And this is the best place to do it. So, yeah, we were petrified. But we also at the same time said, this is an opportunity to really set the standard and really set the bar high. And, one of the things that we had decided prior to opening, in terms of pricing strategy and in terms of what we're going to do, is our vision for this store and for what ultimately wound up being our other stores and for future stores. Our plan was, we want to be the Starbucks of laundromats. And that was our, not business plan, but that was our vision. And so what does that mean, right? So when Starbucks started to open and take over the country, and I don't mean that we want to be the Starbucks and have 5,000 locations. What I meant was the experience that you have when you go into a Starbucks, and when you went to one for the first time, it's really eye-opening. It's sleek, it's modern, the technology is there, and ultimately, it's just like Starbucks. You're going to get a cup of coffee. Laundry's the same way. You're going to put your stuff in a washer. Hopefully, it's going to come clean, depending on where you go. You're going to dry it. You need a place to fold it. So we said, we want to do the same thing. So we invested a lot of time and a lot of thought into making our store sleek, making it, there's not a million signs everywhere. That was another thing that, after going into so many stores for so many years, something that sort of bothered me in a lot of these stores was a million signs everywhere. That,
Mm-hmm.
as anyone that operates a laundromat knows, nobody reads these
Nobody reads
signs.
them. Yeah.
Nobody reads them. So why have signs just littered all over the store? It's clutter. And the other thing that I had decided early on was, we don't have TVs in our stores. And that was something that always bothered me. Whenever I would go into a laundromat, they had to have TVs. They're covered with dust because they're very hard to clean, because they're usually up high so that nobody can steal them. So they're hard to clean. They're covered with dust. typically going to a laundromat, they have more than one TV. They've got two different shows going. So the noise always bothered me. And then you always have like a customer coming up, oh, can you change the channel? Oh, can you put on the football game? And so early on, again, as part of we want to be the Starbucks, no clutter, no distractions. And it serves another purpose, which is another part of our sort of business plan is like, I don't want people hanging out in the laundromat for any reason. And that's another thing. We have no vending machine, let me take that back. No video games, no massage chairs. We do have vending machines, but nothing no coin pushers, none of that. And that's not a knock against the people that do that. It's just my vision was I want people to come in, do their laundry, and then go home. And especially nowadays with iPads, with their phones, you can watch whatever you want to watch. You don't need a TV in a laundromat to watch a show while you're waiting for your stuff to dry. So, we just had a different vision, and it was something that really, as far as I knew, really had not been done in the laundry industry. People would open a laundromat and they would follow the same blueprint that had been followed, with some exceptions where there's new technology and card systems and payment systems and all that stuff. But the same, like we got to put TVs up, you got to have an arcade game, and every space that's available should be producing revenue and all that stuff. But we wanted to go in a different direction. We wanted it really to be a sophisticated place, like the furniture that we picked, a higher end. It's comfortable. And the feedback that we received from the customers was like, this is amazing. This is like a lot of my customers, and my wife and I spent so many hours during COVID in the laundromat. We couldn't find workers. So that necessitated the fact that we needed to be there. I mean, we were there 14, 16 hours a day, every day. And there was a lot of reasons why we did that. Mostly because we wanted to learn the business, meet the customers, and all that stuff. But the feedback we got from the customers, like, this is amazing. This is an oasis. And the one thing that we didn't get was any pushback on our pricing.
Where were you in terms of like your competition on the pricing scale? Were you at the upper end? Were you in the middle? Where did you decide to price yourself?
Yeah, we were on the upper end. I mean, and there's a few reasons for that. One was, New York, we have a high rent. Our rent in that space is $35 a foot, all in. We have a great lease, but the rent is not cheap. Utilities are not cheap. Nothing's cheap. Mm-hmm. So number one, we've got to cover our costs. Number two, we want to provide an exceptional experience at our stores. In order to do that, that costs money, and supplies and cleaning. And, we could get really deep into it and go down the rabbit hole. But we spend a lot of money on cleaning. In this store in Yonkers versus our other two stores, it's not a 24-hour store, not allowed to be 24 hours in that city. So what we have in that store is when we close, prior to closing, we have a cleaning service that comes in and cleans the store every night. So they lock up. Our employees in the morning come in and they open it. But overnight we spend a lot of money on cleaning and disinfecting that store, and all the things that need to be done. So, and that costs money, but our customers appreciate it. They see that our soap dispensers are clean. There's no mold. When you walk into our store, it doesn't smell. We pride ourselves on that. When you provide a service like that, and then another thing, we spend money on, we don't have any machines that are out of order, like, ever. If a machine goes down, it gets fixed. So we pride ourselves on having every machine work, a great experience. So, and that costs money. So where do we fall in? We have a competitor that's slightly smaller, but it's still a big store in the next shopping center. So you could literally walk from our store to that store. It's probably, 2 football fields. They were an older zombie mat store, crowded, it has too many machines in it. It's about 4,000 square feet, and it has about the same amount of machines. So if you think about 5,500 square feet versus 4,000, and it's the same amount of machines, it's really tight in there. I mean, they jammed this store full of machines. It's not kept clean. It's the machines are broken down. It's a classic zombie mat. So that store, it was a free dry store. When we said from day one, we would never do free dry. That's not in our vocabulary. And again, that's not a knock on people that do free dry. And I understand there's pockets of the country, Southern California, for example, there's pockets of the country where free dry is the norm. And again, I'm not knocking anybody who does that. That's just wasn't for us. We just didn't want to do that. So we looked at that store. We spent a lot of time hanging out at that store. Our competitor, they had pretty high washer prices, obviously, right? You got to free dry. There's nothing free, right? So it's free dry, but the washers were kind of on the higher side compared to other stores in the area. So we made a decision. We're going to match their washer prices, but we're not going to do free dry. So when we opened, our 20-pound washers were $4. That's what they were charging for a 20-pound washer 4 years ago, and giving away free dry. They also didn't have, they had a card system, but it was cash only. They didn't accept credit cards, debit, EBT, any of that stuff. And our card system accepts all that stuff, which is really, really helpful for us for a lot of reasons. And we could do a whole show on card systems and versus coin and hybrid and all that stuff. But we decided pricing model, we're going to match their washer prices and we're going to do free dry. And the first customers that came in for the first couple of weeks, months would always say, oh, you're how come you don't do free dry? Why are you so much more expensive? And we had a good answer for that. And it's basically what I just told you, where we have a lot more space. We have more folding tables. Our store is spotless. It's disinfected. The washers actually work properly. The dryers get hot, like all the basics that our competitors weren't doing. So we've always been on the higher end, and we have raised our prices over the last 4 years, especially in the last 12 to 18 months, where inflation has really kicked in. Our insurance price has gone way up. Gas, water, and electric has gone way up. Labor costs, they just keep raising labor. And we were always in order to get good employees, and that's a whole another topic, we have to pay. So we pay way above minimum wage, which in New York right now is 15. We're paying $18, $19 an hour. And then we have a very large drop-off wash and fold business, which garners a lot of tips. And we pass on all those tips to our employees. So they make another at least $3 or $4 an hour cash tips. So our employees, and we figured it out. It took a while. Once we got like a year past COVID, we started to get a lot of people that wanted to work for us, our reputation as owners and operators. And we had a lot of customers that came in and said, oh, can I work here? So we had a lot of problems for 2020, 2021. Toward the end of 2021, we stopped having problems with employees. We got better at managing them and all that. But we've always paid in all of our stores. We pay significantly more than minimum wage. And I know that down the line of this conversation, we're going to talk about pro tips. That's one of the pro tips. You got to pay for good labor. They're running your store. They're there a lot more than you are. They're the face of your organization. They're the face of your brand. They're the face of your reputation. You have to pay them in order to have a good experience. So that's a preview for later. But so that's our pricing model. We are a higher priced. We price higher on our drop off. We price higher on our self-serve, and the customers get something for that. There's value for them.
Yeah. Well, and thank you for kind of going into detail with that, because I think, we've talked a lot about different pricing models, on the show over the years, and, there's different ways to do it, right? You can be kind of a low price leader and go for high volume. You can go be a high price leader and, try to maximize the customer experience. Right. And there's not necessarily a right or wrong way of doing that, but I think, what I liked about everything that you just said is you pretty thoroughly explained your thought process behind it, because it's not just, hey, be a high price leader in your market. It's be a high price leader in your market so that you can provide that top-notch experience. You can pay your employees, and on down the line, and have enough money to actually make that experience good. Because if you don't charge enough, you're not going to have enough to make that experience good, and one of the big criticisms of laundromats, or all the dissuaders, is like, you know you're going to get killed by maintenance and repair costs, if you own a laundromat. And while that can be true, and that has been true for people, a lot of times, because they're not making enough money to properly run their business, because they don't have the right pricing model there. So I
Yeah,
appreciate you sharing all
there's a
that.
couple of, yeah, no, sorry. There's a couple of
Yeah.
things there, and the maintenance is a whole nother story. My my wife actually does most of our maintenance. She's very, very handy. I am not. I don't like taking apart doing machine. Like, I'm not that guy. My wife loves it. She loves YouTube. Another pro tip, we'll get again preview. YouTube is like your best friend as a laundromat operator for so many different things. But my wife does a lot of our repairs, and we do a lot of preventative maintenance. And I think that's where a lot of operators are missing out and really doing themselves a disservice. Because if you do preventative maintenance, you will have less issues with your equipment. And it's as simple as taking out either, the mechanism where the card reader goes, or where the controls are on your washers and dryers. You take that out and you blow it out and get the lint out of there, you're going to have less communication issues. So there's a lot of things that you can do preventative that will give you longer life, spend less on repairs and all that stuff. But we do a lot of preventive maintenance. And yeah, and look, our model is not for everybody. And I have had customers literally come up to me in the store and say, "You're too expensive." And my response to that is, it's very simple. We're not for everybody. We're not for everybody. We're providing an essential service. We have great equipment. We have a great environment. We have free Wi-Fi. We have great seating, but we're not for everybody. And there is a segment of our demographic that will go to a cheaper store because that's what they can afford. And I'm fine with that. And I will tell a customer, "I'm sorry, but this is what we have to charge to provide this environment. And if that doesn't work for you economically, it's heartbreaking that you have to settle for a zombie mat so that you can save some money, but you got to do what you got to do." And again, it's the Starbucks model. Not everybody wants to pay $7 for a coffee or believes that it's worth it. And it's the same with laundry. There are people that say, "It's just a washer and dryer. Why should I pay so much?" I agree, if that's how you feel. But there's a big segment of our population and our demographics where my stores are, where people want that elevated experience. And the way I look at it is, it's less maintenance. So if you think about it, like you said, higher price model, maybe less volume, less turns, less people. It doesn't always work out that way. And I have a couple of stories about that. I mean, especially in our drop off, we always went, when we opened, all of our competitors were doing 99-cent wash and fold. We don't do any pickup and delivery at our stores, but our drop off, 99 cents all day. We opened at $1.25. People said, "You're crazy. Nobody's going to do it." But what we did, again, to set ourselves apart, is higher quality soap. Our machines are better. We have a better packaging. Our employees trained better. And I was fortunate, coming from my background at Eastern, to know so many operators and distributors and everybody. And I could pick up the phone and call. And I actually had one of my former customers at Eastern, a borrower who had stores in Manhattan. I called him and I said, "Hey, you do a lot of drop off at your store. Do you mind if my wife comes and hangs out and one of your employees can show her how you guys fold and package?" And he was like, "I'll do you better. I will come and I'll bring one of my employees to your store and I'll show you how to do it." So I was fortunate. And again, this whole industry there's a lot of people like that. I feel like there's a lot of people that are willing to share. I get calls, I get DMs. and then I still call and DM people when I have issues, and it's a great community, and I encourage everybody out there, join the CLA, go to an event if you can. There are local events now that they're doing, like pop-up events. Go meet some people, network some people, join a Facebook group, get contacts, because that's how we grow and elevate the business. And I was fortunate to have that, and I still have it. But now I'm on the other end where I have people where I'm providing advice and help to, as best I can. But again, pricing wise, we always wanted to be a higher price and be somewhat of a lower volume. It really didn't work, because what we found out was, even though we had a higher price, people liked the service and would continue to pay it. And, so we have a higher price and a higher volume. And my wife always laughs at me. She's, when we get inundated with drop off, her first question is, when are you going to raise the price? And I'm like, it doesn't even help at this point, especially with drop off. I mean, anyone that's in the business that has a drop off business, they know people, once they get used to drop off, they don't go, there's no going back. So anyway, that's my pricing. That's kind of how we arrived at our pricing.
Yeah. That's dude, that was like just a masterclass right there. I mean, it's so good, because it's, it's like so much of this stuff is how we think about it, right? It's really easy to just, like you said, kind of put it on autopilot and do what everybody else is doing in the industry. But when you stop and you put some, genuine thought behind what it is that you're doing, why it is that you're doing, and the devil's in the details, right? Like, you're paying attention to all the little details that make the experience better, and then can price accordingly to allow you to make those things happen. Good things happen, man. And like you said, raising the prices almost doesn't matter anymore, right? Like, you can't get rid of enough customers sometimes.
No, and I'm not advocating like gouging your customers, but charge a price that's fair, that covers your costs, covers your expenses, allows for contingencies, right? Because we never know. Like, for example, in one of my stores, my boiler just died. So, and if anyone's ever done a boiler, it's expensive. It's a lot more expensive than it should be, and there's a lot of plumbing involved. There's a lot of aspects to, like, a boiler itself is not expensive, but taking out the old one and disposing of it, and then hooking up and installing the new one between the gas, the electric, and the plumbing of a boiler, all of that stuff is like twice the price of the actual boiler. But you have to plan for that. And I've seen a lot of stuff where people have an actual like fund where they take X% of their profit and set it aside for just that boiler replacement or a machine replacement or adding a piece of equipment. And I think that's a great idea. But again, if you're not charging the right price and making the profit margin that is commensurate with sort of what the business is, and again, this equipment has a life. It is what, whatever the life is, it has a life. So you have to plan for contingencies like that and things that you can't think of. So again, you have to charge the right price. And if you're in a race to the bottom line, meaning I need the volume, I have to have low prices, I have to compete, I have to get customers in the door, I really think you need to think about that and think differently in terms of, is that the right way to do it? And what that means is, okay, so you have more volume, you may have more revenue, but your equipment is getting abused,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going to have more maintenance, and you're going to have more traffic in your store, and there's a lot of things that are not positive with that sort of theory. And again, if you're doing that and it works for you, that's great. I mean, that's fantastic. But if you're doing that, you're also susceptible to competition that's going to change the way they do it. And and that's definitely a risk.
Yeah. And I mean, you brought up capital expenditures, which does not get talked about in our industry at all. And it's not factored into valuations at all, which I think is a big, a big problem in our, in the way that we value our laundromats, because those are not considered in your expenses when you determine valuations. And a big part of that is because so many owners, so many of us don't think about capital expenditure. We're not planning ahead, to replace the boiler, to replace machines. We don't have that fund that's set aside for those things, and sort of being proactive about that, and strategic about how we approach those big expenses, because this is a capital heavy business, right? That equipment is not cheap. Boilers are not cheap. Card systems are not cheap. And so we've got to be thinking about that a little bit more as we, continue to increase our sophistication in this industry, which we are doing, I think. Thanks to
Yeah, I
people
mean, I
like you
could give
coming on.
you. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I give you a good example. So in this store in Yonkers, we spent a lot of time talking about this store because it was our firstborn, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you always favor your firstborn. So, but one of the things, speaking of capital expenditures, was we when we were planning the store, as I said, there was already somebody that had started the process. We did not have the opportunity to have any change or impact on the equipment mix. We had to go with what was already submitted as far as the layout and the equipment mix. And we thought it was fine. Like, we didn't have any issues with it. In hindsight, we now would have changed the equipment mix and changed the layout a little bit. We did not have enough big machines. We thought we did, but as it turned out, we didn't. When the store was built and when it was open, we had 6 80-pounders, and we had them right up front, which is I highly recommend to anyone that can do it. Put those big machines right up front. It's a wow factor. People come in and they're like, "Wow, those are big machines," and they get a lot of use. 6 80s, and we had 8 60s, and we had 60 washers, and we thought that was enough large capacity equipment. It was not. It just wasn't. People were on the weekends that would line up. They would line their bags up in front of those 80s, and they would go all day long. We unfortunately didn't have space to really make a change there, but we were able to do one thing, which was one of the best things that we did, and that was, in that front row, we had 6 80s, and then we had a 60 and a 30, and next to the 30 was a slop sink. And after probably about 2.5 years and fully ramping the store, we said, I came home to my wife one day. I said, I want to buy a 100-pound washer. She said, "You've lost your mind. Where are you going to? We have no room for that. Where are you going to put a 100-pound washer? And who's going to use a 100-pound washer?" So we're going to take out the 30. We're going to take out the slop sink, because we actually have 2 slop sinks in that store. We're going to take out the 30. We're going to take out the slop sink, and we're going to drop in a 100-pound washer right in the front. And it was one of the best things that we've ever done. That machine does more turns than all the other single machines in the store. And it does more turns than the 80s do. And the customers absolutely love it. So that was one thing. And if I had more room, I'd put another one in. The other thing that we did, and we did have space for this, is that we added 2 stack 50-pound dryers with reversing technology, which we did not exist. Well, it may have existed. I don't know if it was sort of really out there in 2019 when we started this, but we added 2 50-pound stack dryers with reversing technology, and customers have figured out that those dryers dry faster, dry better. Things don't get tangled up as much, especially sheets and blankets. So we were able to add those on top of the 70 pockets of dryers that we already had, and those get more turns, and people wait to use those dryers. So circling back, we invested between those 3 machines, the 100-pound washer and the 2 50-pound stack dryers. I mean, we invested, close to $50,000 into equipment into that store. Well worth it. I mean, that washer paid for itself in about 8 months, literally covered the cost of that washer in 8 months. And the dryers paid for themselves, and I think they paid for themselves in like 11 months.
Hmm.
So you think about a return on your investment, you can't get that return anywhere. And not only that, it helped, especially on the weekends, help get customers in and out a little bit faster. It alleviated some of the, waiting for dryers, all the problems that we have on the weekends. So capital investment, and then we're constantly investing back, like buying a new boiler. We're constantly made some upgrades to store number 2, which we have not talked about, a store that we acquired. It was an existing store. We've invested a lot of money into a lot of things in that store. Talk about capital investment. But it's definitely something that you need to think about as an operator. And if it's not today, it's 6 months, year, 2 years, especially if you have older equipment. A lot of benefits to replacing some of that old equipment. I'm not saying you got to replace everything. You can do it in pieces, but utility savings, depreciation, tax advantages to buying and replacing new equipment, throughput. And I'm a throughput guy. I want to get people in and out, and they want to get in and out. And so that's my capital investment strategy.
Yeah. And again, very well kind of thought through and, reasoning behind all that stuff. And, being strategic like that, it adds up, over time. If you make strategic decisions again and again and again with sort of a philosophy behind it, which is what you're doing, that stuff compounds on itself, right? And leads to you having a big, not necessarily big, but a solid business for you, which is what you have now.
Yeah, and the customers
Cool.
also
So,
notice. Customers notice that. Just
mhm.
one last bit. Customers that come
Yeah.
on, they're like, "That's great. You're adding new. It's great. We love that machine, or we love the new card system. Whatever you're doing." Customers notice that stuff. They really do. Customers see and hear a lot more than you think.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I mean, like you said, they do notice when you invest, and they also do notice when you don't reinvest in your business. And, it's easily, you can see that easily, right? When you ask somebody, hey, what do you think about when you think about a laundromat? Right. And the majority of people are thinking about zombie mats. Like that's what pops into their head when they do that. And so that's why obviously that's a negative for our industry, but that's a huge opportunity. And what I love about you and how you, when I asked you if you were scared when you opened up right after COVID popped off, and you said yes, but we looked at it as an opportunity, right? Same thing with the zombie mat image that people have in their mind. It's easier than ever to wow people if you just come in and, like you said, think about the details, have an overarching philosophy of how you want to run your business and an overarching plan, and then execute that plan. It's easier than ever to wow your customers and to really take a big share of the market there when you come in and do those things, execute on that stuff.
Well, and speaking of sort of reputation, it's a great segue. So it skips over store number 2 again, but store number 3. So we found the space, and the landlord owns hundreds of buildings and properties in New York City, and they had only one experience with another laundromat as a tenant, and it was a bad experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a zombie mat, and they didn't pay their rent, they didn't pay their water. That was a whole thing. In New York City, a lot of places, the water bill goes to the landlord, not to the tenant, and then the landlord has to collect. And that in New York City, and I saw that for a lot of times when I was underwriting loans at Eastern, there was a lot of water problems. This landlord had a negative experience with a laundromat because it was a zombie mat and it was bad. So I had to do some work to convince them that this wasn't, my laundromat was not going to be that, and that
Mm-hmm.
my laundromat was actually going to increase the value of his property. And so I fortunately was able to show them my existing store, show them our website, our marketing, our social media. Like, this is a real business. Like, we're not a zombie mat. And when they saw what would then become what the space is now, they were
Mhm.
all in. So again, reputationally, yeah, we're still battling the zombie mat, the dark, the dingy, crime ridden. I mean, it's still there. A lot
Yep.
of landlords, especially shopping center. I found a great space in a shopping center, and the landlord said, absolutely not, no laundromats in any of our shopping centers. And there was no convincing them. I sent them our website, I sent them photo. It doesn't matter. No laundromats. Laundromats are crime ridden, they're dirty, they're, whatever. So that stigma still exists. Now it's changing for sure. There's a lot of operators all over the country that are really raising the game, and but it still exists. It is a challenge.
Yeah. But like you said, or like you've demonstrated, challenges are opportunities in disguise, right? So
Sure.
it's an awesome opportunity to come in, and some landlords, there's just not going to be any convincing. Some landlords are going to catch that vision and give you that shot, and that's where that opportunity comes in. Especially if you've done your research and the location is good, and the demographics are there, and you can come in and really transform a community, and genuinely, that's what, for me, Laundromat Resource and this podcast and having people like you on this podcast has kind of evolved, from, obviously I want to help owners succeed, help them achieve their goals, financial freedom, leave their 9 to 5, whatever their goal is, right? That's still there. And that is still a primary driver for why I do what I do. However, a layer deeper than that is I want to help all of us change communities, right? And to serve communities better and to instill value in communities. And that is, listening to you talk about how you're running your business, how you're thinking about your business, is huge, and I think hugely impactful, because it's going to help owners be more profitable and help them achieve their personal goals, but also it's going to help them serve communities better. So this is,
For
I'm
sure.
I'm like flying high right now. So I appreciate everything you're sharing. Uh,
No
when
worries.
you built out that laundromat, especially being in COVID times, did you do anything? I think let me back up. One of the big hesitations that people have when it comes to building is, are there going to be enough customers, to, I'm making an investment here. Are there going to be enough customers to kind of support that? Number one question is, how did you know there was going to be enough customers? And number two, did you do anything, like any like marketing or promotions or anything to kind of draw those customers in when you first opened?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things that we did. I mean, one was we looked at the demographics. I had the benefit of, and with all my stores, had the benefit of really, really knowing the area, and really knowing the real numbers of the people. You look, demographics can only tell you so much, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm I'm a sort of glass half full, maybe sometimes empty on demographics. I don't think they really show you the whole picture. They
Mm-hmm.
show you a picture and they give you some data, but that data doesn't give you the full picture, in my opinion. And I know that it's regional as well. New York City and the surrounding tri-state area is a challenging demographic, only from the sense of the statistics don't really paint a picture, versus other parts of the country where I think the demographics do a much better um, job of painting the real full picture. And I also don't think, even if the numbers are fully accurate, I still don't think that is enough. I think you've got to go look at the competition, which we spent a lot of time looking at every store that we thought was within driving distance, and in New York City within walking and driving distance. Um, and we really saw that there was no, especially in Yonkers, there was no, not no, there was probably one decent laundromat, a couple of that were pretty good, and a lot that were terrible. And we also did a lot of research and looking into a lot of apartment complexes and buildings that have their own laundry facilities and what those were. We were able to sneak into a couple buildings and look at what those laundry rooms look like, uh, and we felt very confident that we would be successful, and sort of when we looked at our pro forma, we said, all right, we can do 3 to 4 turns a day, self-serve when we're ramped. And then we can do, 2 to 3,000 pounds a week of drop off. And we plugged in our numbers and we looked at that and said that we'll be successful when we hit those numbers. We're fortunate that we were very, very wrong on those numbers. We have greatly exceeded those numbers. We're to the point where in Yonkers, we average 6 turns a day. Midweek, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we probably do 3 to 3.5 to 4 turns a day. But on the weekends, we do 9 self-service turns. So when we average that out, we do 6 turns a day, every day, every average day of the week. And we've been fortunate with our drop off that we do about 5,000 pounds of drop off a week. And again, drop off is something that it's not, and we'll talk about this a little bit, it's not passive. And I don't believe any part of the business is passive at all. Not even the self-serve, not even an unattended laundromat is passive. But the wash, dry, fold does require more management to do it right and to make money on it. And then pickup and delivery requires even more. But to do it right and to really make money and be successful, you have to pay attention to the wash, dry, fold. It can be very, very profitable. It could also be not as profitable if you don't pay attention to it. Your labor costs, your supply costs, you have to pay attention to that, and you've got to charge the right price. But back to your question, yeah, we did a lot of research. We drove around a lot. We brought our laundry to stores. We dropped off our laundry at stores. And we felt very confident that this was the right location and that we would draw from a certain radius. We have actually wound up drawing from a much bigger radius, and that's a testament to our parking and our reputation, our advertising, and what we do, social media and all that stuff. And we spent a lot of time and put a lot of thought into our marketing, our advertising, our social media, and our promotion stuff. And again, the other question that you asked, when we opened Yonkers, we did a 20 for 20 promotion where you come in, you put $20 on your card, cash. We gave a $20 bonus. And we did that for probably 6 or 8 weeks. And it was very, very successful. It brings people in, it gets them in, it gets them into the habit of coming. And once that money's on your laundry card, you're going to keep coming back to spend it. So that was a good promotion. It worked really well for us. We've done some other things over the years, but nothing really works as well as free money. So what we did ultimately at Yonkers, when we discontinued the 20 for 20, we kept, and we still have it to this day, a $2 bonus for $20 in cash, which I think is, at least in New York, it's pretty common. It's pretty common of a promotion that a lot of operators run. And that works really well for us. A lot of people, will come in, put $20 cash, they get $2 bonus. And that was also something that we used to talk about to the free dry people that would come in. Oh, you're not giving free dry, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, $2 on 20, it's not free dry, but it's cheaper dry. I mean, it doesn't cover a full dry, but it gets you to be pretty close. You do a small load, $2 might get you close to free dry. So that was also ammunition that we used to talk about in terms of when people want to get picky with us. But yeah, there's a lot of things that, especially the advertising, we're a big proponent of Google, Google My Business, Google AdWords. We have figured out that drives the most amount of business. If you think that people are not Googling best laundry in insert your town, your city, if you think they're not Googling cleanest laundry, best laundry, they are. And once they Google it, you've got to have a decent website. You don't have to have a a website with a million bells and whistles, but you've got to have a website that has nice photos of your store, some short descriptions of what you do and what services you provide, because that's what people do. It's just what they do. It's like going to a restaurant. Nobody's going to go to a restaurant without doing a little bit of research. It's the same thing with laundry. And we get people, new customers all the time. They're moving to the area, or their laundromat closed, or they're building. We get a lot of customers that have laundry facilities in their building. It's easy, it's convenient, but when they have to wash a comforter, they can't do that in their building. It's just these buildings don't have that capacity. The first thing they're doing is Googling best laundromat in Yonkers, best laundromat in, Manhattan, or whatever it is. And it's bringing them to our Google page. Then they're looking at, 400 or whatever 5-star reviews. And then they're going to our website, and then it's asking for directions. And then once they come in, then that's where you really got to hook them. Mm-hmm. And we could talk about that if you want, but that's where our employees, where we pay top dollar, that's where they have to take over. So that's the whole chain. But I'm a big proponent. If you and it amazes me that people spend so much money to build these laundromats and then don't have a Google page or a website. Like, it boggles my mind, but it happens all the time. I'll drive, I was driving yesterday, looking at a location, and I put in Google, I put in an address, and I said nearest laundromats, and nothing came up. And this is a very densely populated part of New York City. Nothing came up, and I'm driving, and I see 4 laundromats, no online presence whatsoever. So I'm like, all right, maybe I think I like this neighborhood.
Yeah. That's a good way to mark your neighborhood for a competitor coming in, by not having an online presence. Yeah, for sure. And I've said this a bunch, but I mean, still, it blows my mind, but still having a good online presence, having good reviews, and doing some basic online advertising is low hanging fruit for most laundromats. Some markets, listen, there's some competitors in there that got some sophistication. You got to up your game a little, but still a ton of markets, it's just plain low hanging fruit. But I'm curious,
a lot of it's free. It's not even like I can't afford it. It's free to have a Google My Business page. You can get a website for $200 and $50 a year, or $39, whatever it is, a year for the hosting. I'm not saying you should go out and spend $5,000 a month on a billboard or whatever, but it's free. And like you said, it's low hanging fruit. And I think so many people just don't get it. But anyway, I'm sorry, you were going to say something else.
No, man. You keep I feel like you're just doing this podcast. I don't even need to be here. I'm just going to shut my camera off and the mic off, and you just go, man. This is great. Now I was going to ask, are you doing ads specifically for your drop off, or are you doing self-serve ads and pick up and deliver, or drop off ads?
So that's a great question. We have done both. We're at our store number 1 and store number 2, we are really at our capacity for wash, dry, fold. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is our labor cost. We have 2 attendants at both stores. We have 2 attendants, 2 shifts every day, 7 days a week. So it's 7 to 3, 3 to 11. My Manhattan store, number 2, is a 24-hour store. We have an overnight cleaner, and he actually does a little bit of drop off at night. But the problem is during the day, and we have quotas and we have metrics and all this stuff for drop off. And it's basically, there's not enough machines, and you have to balance with drop off. You really have to be careful, and you have to balance doing too much, meaning your labor cost gets out of hand. Number 1. Number 2, you're using up too many machines, and especially on the weekends. So we go hard Monday through Friday in terms of what we try to accomplish in wash, dry, fold. On the weekends, we pare it back a little bit, because anyone that's ever done this, they know The self-service customers get mad if they see your little tickets on the machines and they want you to take your stuff out, and they don't understand why you're using machines when they're a customer. And we have delicately handled that situation, and we do the best that we can. But honestly, I don't have machine capacity to do more drop off at store number 1, store number 2. So we really do not advertise anymore for drop off at either of those 2 stores. We're at between 5,000 and 6,000 pounds. If you do the math, it's about 200 to 225 pounds per person per shift. I don't want to add a third person. It's per shift. It gets out of hand. And then again, too many machines. And again, I realize this is like complaining about it's a problem that everybody
first world problems, right? Like,
yeah, no,
it's a good problem to have.
No, and I get that. And don't get me wrong, I'm not crying, but it is hard to handle, especially if I go on a Sunday at 10 a.m. and we're using 20 dryers, and I've got people waiting for dryers, and it's not a good look. So the answer is I really don't advertise. I did recently we took all of our data of our customer base at Yonkers. So it's I think it was about 5,000 cell phone numbers out of our point of sale system for drop off. And we took, and that actually includes all of our customers who register their laundry carts for self-serve. And we sent out an email, a text blast, cost us $60. Do a text blast between 5,000 and 6,000 text numbers advertising, bring in your comforter for drop off. Just that. Spring special, bring in your comforters. We didn't even discount the price. We just said spring comforter special. We charge $19 for a comforter. Doesn't matter what size it is. Bring in your comforter, spring special, $19. We blasted that out for $60 to between 5,000 and 6,000 customers, and we were inundated. We were inundated with comforters and also other drop off from customers who maybe hadn't come in for a while or said, "Oh yeah, that's I'm gonna come in. I forgot about Clean Fresh." Mm-hmm. So we actually it was a miscalculation on my part because it was just too much. So we did that 2 weeks ago, and we have gone way over what we want to do. But again, for $60, we really hit it out of the park. But that was kind of a one-off. It was more of an experiment to see what it would actually do, because it was the first time we did a text blast. It far exceeded our expectations, but we do actively advertise our self-serve. I don't feel that we could ever be too busy at self-serve at any of our stores. Even on the weekends, I still think we have some capacity for more self-serve, but we do a combination of we do a lot of social media advertising. We target certain neighborhoods on social media. We do Google AdWords, and it's not a ton of money, and you can control it, especially nowadays. It's kind of easy. You can set a budget and say, I only want to spend $400. So, and all these companies, all the social media and Google, when your ad hits a certain number of people, it just stops for that month. When you hit whatever your budget is, and your budget could be 100, it could be 200, it could be 5,000, whatever it is. So you can control that in terms of what you want to spend, so that you don't get hit with a huge amount of money. But we do targeted ads, and with our new store that we opened about 8 weeks ago, we're doing a lot of advertising in the neighborhood where that store is to get it ramped up. It's a new store, new neighborhood. So we do a lot of advertising on that store for both social media and for drop off.
Okay. We haven't even talked. I mean, I feel like we could just talk all day, but let's go to your second store, which I know that you purchased an existing store. So my first question is, why go from building, which, I mean, from all observations and from me, seems like the toughest way to go. So why go from building to buying a store?
So that's a great question. While we were trying to get open, so we finished construction on store number one about Thanksgiving of 2019. And that's about 5 months before we opened for a lot of reasons. We could not get open, but we were finished. So I sort of had the idea that, this might become a thing. And so I actually started looking for another location right around January of 2020. And I kind of abandoned that once COVID hit, but I started looking, just some feelers, talked to some distributors in the area, a couple of brokers, didn't find anything. Then COVID hit, and we were full-time, overtime in the new store, learning the business, ramping it up, trying to hire people, all that stuff. Kind of put expansion on the back burner. Toward the end of 2020, a couple of things popped up, didn't really love them. Did not want to make a big mistake. And in this industry, with where pricing is, both for an acquisition or for building a new store, especially in New York and in some of these big cities, it's a big investment. I did not want to make a big mistake. So I looked at some spots to build. I looked at some stores for sale. Nothing really blew me away. The beginning of 2022, I got a call from a former client of mine at Eastern who was a borrower, owned 3 stores. And he said, "Hey, I heard you got into the laundry business. I'm thinking of retiring. Would you be interested in buying one of my stores?" I said, "Sure, let's talk about it." And it happened to be in Manhattan at the very northern tip of Manhattan, which wound up being about 18-minute drive from my house. Which is one of my criteria. And then we could do a whole podcast about where everybody's stores are and how far. I did not want to be very far away from my stores for a lot of reasons. So my stores are all actually within 20 minutes of where I live and 20 minutes from each other or less. So geography worked. Drove down there, looked at it. I was a little hesitant at first because it had, at that time, 20-year-old Dexter washers and dryers, which worried me a little bit. But this guy ran a very professional business, and different than my store in Yonkers, this store is a little bit smaller. It's 3,000 square feet. It's got 42 washers and 44 dryers, a little bit smaller. Manhattan store, so less space, more compact, but they were doing 50% drop off and 50% self-serve. Which can be good, can be bad. It was a little different than what I did at Yonkers. But the infrastructure was there. I didn't have to build anything. The employees were there. And my wife and I were still kind of in shock a little bit about the construction process. Mm-hmm. Our first experience with construction and with having it take so long and so costly and all that stuff. So we looked at it, and you talk about valuation. So 20-year-old equipment, mm-hmm. We bought that store at 4 times the net. And again, another podcast, but valuations is a whole topic that is a big topic. Mm-hmm. But we felt that was a reasonable multiple. We also realized that store could do a lot better. As professional and organized as the owner was, there was a lot of things he was leaving on the table. For example, it was a cash only store. They had a card system that was an old Dexter Easy card system, cash only. And again, they were doing 50% of their revenue. They were doing a ton of revenue. They were doing like 6,000 pounds of drop off at a very cheap price, and no credit cards. No credit cards at the counter, no credit cards at the VAC, old card system. So we saw a lot of opportunity there that also he was buying supplies. He was doing so much drop off. He was paying double for soap what I was paying at my other store. So there was a lot of positives there. The only real negative was that the equipment is old. And that actually wound up not being an issue because the store came with an employee who just fixed the equipment. he was part of the package. And he has been, not only does he fix the equipment, but he's a handyman. He does our vent cleaning. He can fix anything. That store came with a probably almost 2-year supply of parts for those 20-year-old Dexters. And one of the things with the Dexters, for anyone out there that is a Dexter fan, I am a Dexter fan, only because of the fact this equipment is so durable. The parts are available. The parts are the same parts. The washer parts are essentially the same parts on the new washers, which most of the other manufacturers are changing parts all the time. So I have Speed Queen washers and dryers in my first store. Awesome. Love them. But new Speed Queen washers and dryers have different parts. And that really becomes a challenge over time. But I've been very lucky. My wife is very handy, fixing machines. But so anyway, the opportunity came. We loved the location. It's a great neighborhood, established store, came with staff that had been working there. Some of the staff had been there for 15 years. Most of the staff, they're like related to each other. And they have been tremendous. In fact, even when I changed all of the things that I changed there, including the card system, the point of sale, I changed the counter area. We did a lot of work. They've been tremendous, and they really treat this store as like their home. They know all the customers. So this was just an opportunity that I just couldn't pass up. And again, at 4 times net, I mean, they say the average in many years of financing these stores 3 to 5 times, maybe a little bit more than 5 now because of a lot of factors. But a 4 times net store. Now, I was just worried that paying 4 times net and then I might have to replace all this equipment. That could be a problem. But I mean, knock on wood, we're almost 2 years past that, and I have just been in love with this store, and being able to accept credit cards, having a card system, point of sale, changing the cost structure. I paid 4 times net. I really paid probably 2.5 times net, considering the added revenue and decrease some expenses and just making it a better existence. So again, valuation could be a whole, we could talk for 2 hours about value and, how to value stores and things like that. But this was just a tremendous opportunity that I couldn't pass up. So that was the story there. And it actually having this store led to store number 3. And the way my wife kind of puts it is that she equates, I could never get away with saying this, but she equates building a store to having a baby.
Okay.
Takes a long time. It's painful, all those things. And what she said is, I'm ready now to have a second baby. I wasn't ready. Now I'm ready. And again, our population in this country would be a lot less if people remembered the actual process.
How bad it actually was.
Thing,
yeah.
how bad it actually was. And you forget over time, because again, our store is so successful and it's so great, and the reaction of the customers or whatever has been so tremendous that we decided, and again, it wasn't a conscious decision. I always look at stores. I get calls from brokers and distributors all the time, and I look all the time, but our thing is, we don't want to have a lot of stores. We want to have the right stores. And at this point, and this is not bragging, but I could have 15 stores at this point, but probably 10 of them would be not great. So part of our strategy, we want to have great stores. We don't want to have just mediocre stores. In our experience and sort of how we feel, it takes the same amount of time and energy to have a store that does okay as a store that does phenomenal. So why not have all stores that do phenomenal? If you're going to put it just requires the same amount of energy. You still got to manage the employees, you got to manage the inventory, you got to manage supplies, you got to manage the facility. So we were never, we're quality over quantity, my wife and I. So we're operating store number 2. Everything's going wonderful. Get a call from a distributor, and says, I have a location. It is not a laundromat currently. It was a restaurant nightclub. It is 12 blocks from your existing store. Now, for everybody in whoever's listening to this, for you to understand, that's a long way in Manhattan.
Right.
It is a long way. It's about a mile and a little more than a mile walk. But the density of people in that distance is a lot. There's a lot of people. And the best thing about it was where this new store was or is located, there's no competition there. There's so many people, but there's no competition. The competition is in apartment buildings. It is a completely apartment building area. Every apartment building has a laundry room. Same situation. They're small. They're in the basement. They're not kept properly. They're not maintained. The machines are small, like all the same thing. The only drawback to having stores in Manhattan is there's no parking. So it's street parking. So it's a retail on a street. Both my Manhattan stores do not have quote unquote parking. There is street parking and there's double parking. And in some cases, there's triple parking. So that's your parking. So you're not going to really, if you have a store in a really urban area like this, you're not going to be able to draw from like my Yonkers shopping center. I probably have 200 parking spots. I draw from a huge radius for that store. You're not going to get that in Manhattan. You're just not. But the density of people, you're talking about, anywhere from 5-story apartment buildings to 20-story apartment buildings. I mean, the density of people is just, it's off the charts. So looked at the location, really, really liked it. This was a landlord that was a challenging landlord to deal with because of laundromat reputation, nightclub. And we said, all right, we're ready. We're ready to get back into the game. And we wound up taking everything that went wrong with build number one, a lot of different things, and everything we learned from store number one, store number two, and we had a tremendously positive experience building store number two. And part of it was what we did leading up to it, the things that we negotiated into the lease. Having a very good landlord was also helpful. And you don't know, this was a professional organization with a building manager and this is a real landlord. So we were able to take the positives and the negatives from our first building experience, and we really, really did a great job. And, it just turned out to be, a really great experience building the second store. Now we're only open 7 or 8 weeks. We're still ramping. We're still working out sort of the kinks to it. And one of the really interesting things was 3 stores, 3 different brands of equipment. So first store, Speed Queen equipment. And again, where we are, it's so challenging to find good locations. There's so much competition in this area from people wanting to get into the business and people who are already in the business. So we're relying on our contacts and our friends. And so contact friend found us our first location. Second location, we were able to purchase. Third location, different distributor. So we were in a spot where we could not really pick what brand of equipment. And honestly, if I had to pick a brand of equipment, it would be very challenging. If I could buy any equipment in the world, I don't know that I can make that decision. I think it would be very, very challenging, only because we had great experience with the Speed Queen equipment. We've had a great experience with Dexter equipment. This distributor, who is somebody I've known for almost 30 years, Electrolux dealer, found the location. In fact, they had a letter of intent and a deal to take the location with the landlord. And then they realized that we had a store 12 blocks away and called us up and said, you really need to take this location. But they had that location locked up. So part of that is I got to buy Electrolux equipment. And again, nothing against Electrolux. I just didn't have experience with Electrolux equipment. But it's been great, tremendous experience so far. Great support from that organization and from the dealer. But like I said, we were able to do the layout the way we wanted to, pick the right equipment mix that we wanted to, the infrastructure the way we wanted to, and we learned from our past experience. So it's just been a great experience. We came in under budget. We wound up negotiating with this landlord. We got 9 months of free rent, and we actually, from start to finish, built this store in under 9 months. Just under 9 months, like 8 months and 25 days or something. And if you know anything about New York, that is a tremendous feat to get a store built that was not a laundromat in that amount of time. I mean, it really was tremendous. And that, again, was because I was on it. I was there. I was not passive. It's not a passive business, especially when you're building something. And I had used, I built on my experience with building store number one, and I was on it. And again, we could do a whole podcast on building a store. And in fact, I'm doing a presentation at the Excellence conference down in Florida next week specifically about building a store. So that's a big topic, but you've got to manage it. You've got to be there. And I would go in the beginning. I didn't go when we were doing demo and all that stuff. I really didn't go a lot. I was there. But when they were building, doing plumbing, doing electric, doing venting, doing HVAC, I was there probably 4 out of 5 days a week that they were working. And every day I went, I would get questions. If I wasn't there, they would have just done whatever. I don't even know. I mean, they would. But I walk in every day and I'm like, oh, Mr. Steve, you're here. I have 5 questions for you. How do you want this? And where do you want that? And so, again, that was helpful in terms of getting it done on time and on budget. So again, you've got to be involved. It's not a passive business.
Yeah. Okay. So real quick, I mean, I want to see if you can kind of give us an idea. So you mentioned, I want to kind of compare the first build and the second build. You said you learned some lessons and stuff. So maybe you can talk about some of those lessons. I know you mentioned one of those being in the first one, when you negotiated rent, you had no rent abatement. You had no free rent. So while construction was going on, you're paying rent. COVID hits, things get extended out. That is straight out of your savings account, basically, right? That is just coming straight out of your pocket. And nothing is coming back in, which is super stressful. I can assure you, and I can imagine what you were going through there too. And the second one, you were like, okay, listen, this is going to take a little time. Let's see if we can get some rent abatement, some free rent, so that stuff's not coming out. We don't have that financial pressure going on. Any other like lessons you can kind of relay between the two builds? I'm just kind of curious because, I mean, I get asked about building laundromats all the time, and you're inevitably going to make mistakes. It doesn't really matter how many times you've done it. You're going to make some mistakes. But I'm curious as to what lessons you learned between the first one and that second one.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest problems that we had at store number one was the drainage. So for anyone that's sort of new to the business or whatever, when the washers drain their water multiple times during a cycle, that water and that wastewater needs to go somewhere. And I didn't know anything about that. I honestly didn't even really understand fully how a washer really worked. That's a whole different story. But when you wash their clothes, the rinse water has to go somewhere. And when you say go somewhere, it's going into a sewer mostly, unless you're in a part of the country where it's going into a septic system. That's all, whatever. But it's got to go somewhere. And I didn't understand the problems that would cause. I also didn't understand that it's not just water coming out of those washers. It's a whole bunch of other stuff, which still today, I can't fully wrap my head around some of the things that come through the basket of the washer into the drain.
Yeah.
And so one of the problems that we had was on our opening day on store number one, we did a lot of promotion and we had a bunch of customers. And about 2 hours into our quote unquote grand opening, the washer banks started to flood and we didn't understand why that was happening. And so one of the things that didn't happen was when they finished construction, when they do construction, all the drain lines have sediment in them just from dirt and dust and debris. And we didn't know, and our contractor didn't understand, or for some reason didn't do it. That stuff has to be, pumped out. You have to get either a snake or you have to get there's different ways that you flush out those drain lines. We didn't do that, and there was a lot of sediment. So on our first day, after not being able to open for about 6 months, paying all that rent, having COVID go on, we had a flood on day one. So obviously, we learned from that. So I made sure that the plumber who built store number 3 blew out all those lines prior to us opening, and we tested it. Literally, I started every washer in that store before we opened, all at the same time, had them all dump at the same time. So we have 55 washers in this new store. I turned them all on and ran them and made sure that we didn't have a flood. So that was one thing. But the drainage itself, like we also didn't understand, and our contractor who had built a lot of stores didn't either understand or fully explain to us or whatever. But the way that we built these stores, because they're both, there's no basements in our stores, they're slab. So it's concrete slab. They go in when you're doing construction, they dig a trench, and that's where your washers are going to dump into. Those trenches have, each trench has 2 or 3 drains in them that go down into a pipe, and that pipe, those all connect and they go out to the sewer. The problem is if 1 or 2 of those drains get covered with lint, debris, credit cards, money, you name it, because all that stuff gets in there, and that covers those drains, the water has nowhere to go but up and into the store. Mm-hmm. So, and we spent a tremendous amount of time, and we would even go over the washers, clean out those drains by hand, and we did it almost daily, and we would still have a problem. A pillow would explode, a comforter would explode, cover up all those drains, the water comes up, and you got a flood. So after a couple of years of many different types of trying to fix that problem, and I know that there are solutions out there now where there's lint collector troughs and there's different things. We wound up putting in lint screens on either side of those drains, where if you do have a pillow explosion or you have something blocking, they hit those screens. It could still go over the screen and into the drain, or into one of the other drains. But we took it a step further. And again, this was my wife's design after her hopping back there and cleaning out those drains. All of our bulkheads, so we have 3 rows of washers in this new store. At either end of the bulkhead, we have a door. We have an access panel. And it sounds like something, it's so simple, mm-hmm. but we had to convince our contractor that why we needed it, right? So they didn't want to build it that way. They wanted the ends of the bulkheads just be tile. We said, no, we want an access door. We want a drain right there. We can literally reach in, clear out the drain, get the lint screen, clear out the lint screen, put it back in, rather than climbing over the machines. So that's one thing that we did. And just in terms of the architecture of how do we maintain these drains, because it's a constant struggle that these drains are getting clogged with debris and flooding the store. So we learned from that issue. So that's one example of what we did. And just the way we built our counter area compared to the way we did it on store 1, kind of made it more open, better shelving. We put a lot of thought into sort of workflow. Given that our 2 existing stores did so much drop off, we anticipate this new store will do a lot of drop off. So where we put the cash register, where we put the counter, where we put the point of sale, the flow of, how work gets done. And in fact, in the new store, one of the things that we did is behind the counter, in the counter area, we built a folding table well, what we did was we built a counter, but at folding table height, so that our attendants can actually fold behind the counter. So they're not using up folding tables that customers would use. They're also behind the counter, which is better for visibility and for safety and for all that stuff. But yeah, we just learned from our existing, and our staff gave us a lot of ideas. Unfortunately, they would give us ideas when it was too late to do anything about it. They were like, "Oh, you should have put this there."
Right.
Okay,
Yeah. The should have.
you can't.
Yeah.
We can't do that. But on the new store, yes, we're going to do some of those things. So really, it's about layout. The way we laid out where all the washers and the dryers were. There's a lot of different schools of thought on layout. I know a lot of operators that they'll do a bank of washers and they're all the same size. And then they'll do another bank of washers and those are all the same size. And I like that visually because it's kind of flat. I don't do it that way. I build pyramids. So I have an inverse pyramids, and I do that in the dryers as well. I look at it from a customer standpoint. A lot of customers like to separate. So, and it's typically like a small load of whites in a 20-pounder, and then 100 or 80 pounds of colors into a big machine. Now, if those two machines are on opposite ends of the store, that creates all sorts of problems. And the same thing with the dryers. So we have in the new store, we have 35-pound stacks and we have 55-pound stacks. I have them staggered because, again, if somebody's got a small load of whites, they're going to want to dry those whites separately. They're not going to want to put 16 pounds of whites in a 55-pound dryer and pay what that's going to cost. So I like the staggered approach. Visually, I don't love it because, again, visual, the sight lines and all that stuff, but customers love it. They like the fact that there's a 20, a 30, a 50, all, or 40, whatever it is, all near each other that they can use rather than they're all over the store and then they forget where their stuff is and they ultimately leave stuff somewhere. So those are really the things that we learned building store number one and then the second build.
Yeah, huge. And those are things that are hard. I mean, there's really no way if you don't have that experience unless you bring somebody on who has that experience or listen to this podcast, there's really no way that you can, know that kind of thing until you run it and you're like, oh, this would be useful to have a 20-pounder next to a 60-pounder or whatever. Because
and if you're dealing with a contractor or an equipment distributor that has been doing this for many years and you've not, you're going to rely on their recommendations and they may be well, okay, why do you want to put all the washers why do you put a row of 20-pounders? And typically the answer will be that's the way we've always done it. And that answer to me, whenever somebody tells me that, it's really frustrating because that's not an answer. If you think about it, why? Okay, well, we've always done it. That's the way we've always done it, but why? And I get it visually, as far as construction wise, it's easier to build a bank that's, the pad or the bases, however you put washers in your store. It's kind of easier to have them all one row is one size so that the depth of those bases or pads are the same. And then as far as sort of the depth, so you have two decisions. If you make like what we do, where we make a pad with all different sizes, we have all the fronts are even and then the backs are all different because, right, the depths of bigger machines are deeper and things like that. So it is a little bit more challenging when you're doing plumbing and electric on that, but I'm paying. So, they got to do it the way I want to do it.
Yeah. The builder's not your customer. Your customer's your customer, right? So you got to build it for the customer, not to make it easy on the builder, for sure. And I was going to ask you about do you align the fronts or the backs? Cause there's different kind of thoughts on that or different preferences on that too. And sometimes you can't align the fronts. Like if you're retrofitting, you're adding like a few machines here or there. Sometimes you can't. But I was just kind of curious, building from scratch, you're aligning the fronts, which does give you a more of a visual lines and a little more visual aesthetic when you're aligning the fronts there. So you got that at least going for you.
Yeah, I mean, you run into some challenges like we had a couple of columns holding up. It's a single story. Our building is single story. We had some columns that were holding up, and our initial layout, even though we have the architect and they dropped the column into the plans, it's not exactly. So we actually had to change the layout slightly because we didn't have the depth at one spot. We couldn't put a 60-pound washer. We didn't have enough depth because it was too close to the column. And then we had the same thing with some dryers where, the 55-pound dryer is a little bit deeper. So we had some issues. And again, that's all part of the construction contract and being on site. You've got to be able to pivot sometimes because none of these spaces are like square boxes with no columns. Like that doesn't happen.
Yeah,
so there's always sort of a wrinkle where even though we had a layout, we had to swap a thing or two. But yeah, you've got to do what's right for you, for your customer base. And it all depends on sort of your preference. And again, there's no right or wrong. And I know a lot of people that do all things different, and everything works. If it works for you, it's great. But we have our kind of our way to do it.
Yeah. Because that's how you've always done it. So no, I'm just kidding. On the on the builds, and I know your third store here is new, 7-8 weeks or whatever, but maybe thinking back to your first one. I mean, do you remember like any kind of timeline until you were like, okay, we're break even? Did that happen quickly? Did it take months, years? What do you remember what that was like?
Yeah, I do actually. So store number one, we opened May 9th, and the month of July, we broke even. And
quick.
I think that's we did not budget that for this store. That's not going to happen on this store. It's going to take longer to ramp this one. Again, it's just a completely different animal. And we're budgeting 6 months on this store to break even. And I think we're probably on pace for that. I think this store is just going to ramp. It's going to take longer to ramp. And I just think because of, again, it's a different demographic. It's a different neighborhood, and the park, it's just tough. The parking challenge is a little bit of a challenge. We get a lot of walkers, carts, push carts. But again, like I was there Sunday and we had 2 cars double parked, trunk pops open, 8 bags come out. They start loading, they move the car, and that happens at our other store in Manhattan quite a bit, and that also leads to more drop off. I think having a store in a really densely urban area like that, people tend to do more drop off. It's just part of what the area has.
Yeah. How's the ramp on the drop off of that third store going?
Yeah, it's every day. We get a new customer at least every day. I think the first week we had like 2 drop offs, like nothing. And I have full staff. I mean, I have 2 attendants for all the shifts. So they're texting me. What do we do? Just keep cleaning. Just keep cleaning. You'll at some point, and I said this to some of my employees at my other store, you're going to look back on this and say, wow, I wish it was like when we first opened. Right. I had nothing to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'll get there, and it already has. Like we're doing, right now, I think we're like 3 or 4 drop off orders a day. It's a couple 100 pounds a day, something, and every day it'll get better and better. But we're not going to break even in month 3. There's no way. But we will get there. This is going to be a great store.
Yeah. Well, and what's important too is that you've anticipated that, right? Like I see so many times where people put everything they have into building or remodeling a store or whatever, and they don't think that like it takes time, right? And for those ramps, especially for new builds, I mean, I see probably on, and this is not like an official statistic, but just through my conversations with people, I'm looking at 6 to 18 months to that break even point, on those new builds a lot of times. So if you don't anticipate some of that ramp up time, it's real easy to get yourself in some hot water early on. And it's tough to dig yourself out of that once you start that sort of downward spiral where you're not keeping up with what you got, what your expenses are. Um, so
Yeah, you've
kudos to
got to
you.
build that in. I mean, yeah, we built that into our budget. We figured labor. It's a 24-hour store, so it's five people per day. So it's 5 8-hour shifts. 4 during the day, one overnight. Um, at $18+ an hour, plus all the expenses for payroll, plus rent. I mean, so we've budgeted all of that into a 6 month sort of plan, and you just don't know. Yeah, you don't know what you're going to get, and unfortunately, a lot of people new to the business, they don't anticipate that. Um, and the other thing they don't anticipate, and again, I'm going to talk about this in my presentation at the Excellence, is I have a slide on my presentation that I call expenses that nobody ever tells you that you're going to have.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's actually 2 slides because there's so many things on there. So everybody looks at what's your construction, what's the equipment cost, and then working capital. But nobody ever tells you what that working capital actually is going to be. And it's a lot. There's a lot of stuff in there. There's a lot of things: security cameras, vending machines, all sorts of any sort of electronics, computers. We have bill breakers at our stores, so we don't do quarters, but we have bill exchangers at our stores. The cost of those bill exchangers are typically added into your equipment costs, but nobody told you that you've got to put 250 $20 bills, 250 $10 bills, 250 $5 bills, 250 $1 bills, and we have two of them. So
Yep. Yep.
homework for everybody out there:
It's a lot of money.
do the math on what that is, and that is, it's a lot of money, and that's just one of the things. And if you do a quarter store or a coin store, think about how much it costs to put quarters into two hoppers, or four hoppers, whatever it is. And again, that's something that you don't think about, and getting a point of sale system, and all the wiring that you have to do for a sound system or for whatever, those things, it adds up. Your inventory, like, so we do a lot of drop off. So I had to buy a 55-gallon barrel of soap, 55-gallon barrel of softener, and all the inventory that we're going to sell in our vending machines. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on before you make one penny of revenue. So yeah, you've got to really, and this is where relationships, networking, having a great distributor, having people that you could talk to that have been through this, and having Laundromat resource where you can go and listen to these podcasts and listen to, and I've listened to a lot of them, and even today, I don't know everything. I know I don't know everything. And I was listening to a podcast the other day, one of your guys, I think he was in Ohio. I forget the guy's name. I forget his name, but I learned a lot. Like, I was writing stuff down. I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. Like, I'm going to use that. So, lots of resources out there. Take advantage of them.
Yeah. 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 Awesome. Well, and I guess we'll recap that in a little bit here, too. One question I get asked all the time, I think you're a perfect person to weigh in on, is, a lot of people getting into this business ask me, well, should I buy an existing one or should I build one from scratch? What are your thoughts on the buy versus build conversation? Obviously, you've built your first one and it went really well. You've also bought and it's gone very well. So I'm just kind of curious on your, and I'll just preface it by saying, hey, you can be successful either way, right? So, but I'm curious on your opinion on that buy versus build conversation.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I see that a lot on a lot of the Facebook groups. People ask that exact question. And again, there's no right or wrong answer, but what I would lean towards, and there's positives and negatives to both. So the positive, I'll go both ways. The positive to building a store is you have really kind of an unlimited potential when you build a store, because you're starting from scratch. You're going to create something that hopefully doesn't exist, and you're going to draw, right? And you're hopefully going to build in an area that really needs it. Otherwise, why are you doing it? So the positives to building are you really have a lot of upside. So you're going to invest what you're going to invest, but your upside is significant. The problem with building is the cost, the time, the ramping, not being knowledgeable in terms of building something, in construction, and there's a lot of things that can go wrong, versus buying a store, where it's an operating entity, where on the day that you take over, not only do you have revenue, if you've done your homework properly, you're going to have profit. And there's a lot to be said for that. And I'm actually, I would lean, if somebody said, which should I do? I don't know anything about the laundry business, or I know some. I would really recommend buying an existing store. Now, there's challenges to that. There's a lot of challenges to that. One is making sure that you're not going to you're getting the right information. Due diligence is somewhat challenging in our industry for various reasons. It's really hard to verify some of the revenue, but I would say buy an existing store, learn, get your feet wet, and hopefully you can improve upon that business, make it more profitable. But at least whatever you invest, you have a return on that immediately. The problem with building a store is the runway is sometimes long. Like you said, it could be 6 to 18 months before you're turning a profit, and that's challenging. However, it can turn into something really, really exceptional if you do it right. And buying a store, you really are kind of limited. You can only improve an existing store so much. There's a limit to what you can improve upon, because it's already there. It's an existing store. It has a reputation, and you can change that over time. But it's really, really hard to significantly double, the profitability of a store that you buy. But I would say, if I had to answer that, I would definitely say try to find something that is a little bit smaller, get your feet wet, and you've got income from day one is, I think, a much better path.
Well said. And I agree with you. And but also, man, kudos to you for coming in, building, from the get go, and making it happen, making it work, because it's not easy. And obviously, there's people who've done that successfully plenty of times, but it's not easy. It's a tough, like you said, it's like giving birth, or like your wife said, I guess, it's like giving birth there. So I think we've covered just about everything and down to business. So I'm going to skip that segment, except for you kind of teased us a little way early on. So I just want you to, and you did such a good job weighing in on the buy versus build. I'm curious on your opinion, which you alluded to, on the coin card hybrid kind of debate. Can you just weigh, you don't have to go crazy and do it, but just kind of weigh in a little bit on how you're thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, my thought process was, and again, there's a lot of factors, there's no right or wrong. And I see this debate daily on the Facebook pages. Cash is king. I would never do a card system. The internet can go down. And, there's a lot of sort of fear on something new and different. Even though it's not new, card systems have existed for a long time, but they've really become prominent more recently.
Mm-hmm.
I personally would never do a coin store, only because my stores are so large and so busy. And I've actually, on a Sunday morning at 10 a.m. and I'm walking around and I'm going, man, I have 135 machines in this store alone. If I had to do a collection right now of quarters, it would be a problem. And not only that, but I probably at 10 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
on a Sunday, I probably have to come back at 10 p.m. on a Sunday and do it again. So one thing is the logistics of collecting quarters and the time and energy that I would have to put into that, number one. Number two, it's really about me wanting to manage my business better. And I feel strongly that having a card system allows me to manage my business a lot more efficiently, a lot more profitably. We can get into a debate about, and this happens again all the time. I've done it. I feel that you will have more revenue with a card system store than with a coin store. And I'm not even going to talk about hybrid because it's just too complicated. So for the sake of this conversation, coin versus card. And I have had a store that had a card system, but no credit. So it was a card system and it took cash, but no credit. When I replaced that card system with a full blown card system that took credit, debit, Apple Pay, EBT, as well as cash, the revenue goes up. It just does. People spend more money when they're not pulling cash out of their pocket to pay for something. When you have the option to load $20 from a credit card onto your laundry card versus I got to pull cash out of my pocket, you're going to spend more. And we have seen the float, and for people that don't know what that is, the float is the money that's loaded onto a laundry card and then not used. Now, when I say not used today. So I go into one of my stores, I load $20 onto the laundry card, I spend 10, there's a $10 float. Now, in theory, they're going to come back and spend that $10, but when they come back, they're going to put more money on the card. So there's a lot of different aspects to it. One of the things with a laundry card that I really love is it's sticky. When a customer comes in, they load $20 onto a clean, fresh laundry card. It's sticky. They're going to come back and spend the rest. And additionally, it's never going to get to zero. So they're always going to have money on their card. They're going to keep coming back. It's habit forming. It keeps them in our store. People with quarters, they can go to any laundromat. There's nothing sticky about somebody with quarters. And as far as quarters, when we talk about we don't take quarters, we do take quarters. People come to our store occasionally with a bag of quarters. We happily take them and we give them cash for it. So when somebody's argument is, I have to take quarters because I'll lose customers, you can still take quarters and have a card system. Those things are not mutually exclusive. So, again, ease of management. I can go on my phone, my laptop, my iPad right this second, and I can see what machines are being used. I can see what my daily revenue is. I can see all the reporting. I can see my weekly, monthly. I can see my daily. I can see what machines got used how many times. I can raise my prices. Right now, I can raise them by a penny. I don't have to raise them by quarter increments. I can raise them by a penny. I can do it right now. I could do time of day pricing where I raise my prices for the weekends. I don't do this, but I know people do it. Give a discount on the weekdays. I'm not a proponent of that, but it's things that you can do. You can manage customers' cards. Customer has a problem. My card doesn't work. I can manage that remotely on my phone. I don't have to drive to the store and give them quarters whenever happens. The other thing that I love about a card system, especially the one that I use, is it's contactless. So a lot of issues with quarters jamming, lint getting into quarter slots, or even card systems that use you insert your card into a slot. Those slots get filled with lint. They don't work. The contact doesn't work. So I like the fact of full reliability, the card system that we use. Also, if we lose internet in the store, it still works. You can still start the machines. You can still add cash. And we have a backup internet that is LTE. So it's
Cellular.
it's
Yeah.
cellular. Thank you. That was the word I was looking for. So even when our main internet goes down, we have a backup internet. So we don't lose connectivity. Very reliable. Our vending machines run on the same system with that laundry card. So again, for cash management, there's less cash floating around. There's no quarters. There's no buckets of quarters. I hear horror stories from a lot of the operators where they will dump a bucket of quarters on the floor, ultimately doing a collection. And that's just not something that you want your customers to see. So there's just, for me, I know that there are some positives to quarter stores or even hybrid stores, but to me, the benefits far outweigh the benefits having just a no coin system or no tokens far outweigh the benefits of accepting those. So again, I'm just a proponent of tech. I like the technology. I like all the features that a card system gives to your customers, and my customers actually love it. I no complaints from my customers about a card system. The only complaint was I have these quarters, and we've solved that. We exchange them at the counter. So, it's a really good feature in today's world, especially where people are used to using credit cards, used to using loyalty cards. Everybody has, a Dunkin' Donuts card where they use loyalty, or in big cities like New York, they have the Metro card for the subway or the buses. So it's not a foreign concept, and it's 2024. I think your customers can handle it.
Awesome. That was great. And I could even tack some more onto that, but I thought that was great thought process. And again, it's these details, thinking through these things that just put you over the top, and help you stand out among your competitors. And because it's not just a matter of using the card system, it's also how you use the card system to help you manage your store and also to serve your customers better and provide a better experience for those guys. It's awesome. We've got a segment of the show called Secret Sauce.
It's the secret sauce.
Theme music and everything.
Look at that, man. And Secret Sauce is this. What's like your best piece of advice for people who own laundromats? Maybe it's something working well for you that they can implement, or, just your best piece of advice for current owners of laundromats to help them improve their business.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is you've got to be there. And I know that our industry has, so for so many years, it was a side business. It was a side hustle. I have a full-time job, and I have this laundromat, but the business is changing. And if you have a full-service laundromat and you provide more than just self-serve unattended, you've really got to be there. You have to have face time with your employees. You have to have face time with your customers. You've got to learn what works, what doesn't work. And to me, this is not rocket science. It's really a simple concept. You're providing machines that people can use to wash their clothes, providing a laundry service, but you've got to be there to know what they want, what they like, what they don't like. To me, it's essential. You've just got to be involved. You've got to be there. And that leads to so many opportunities and so many positive things, especially with your employees. Your employees, they have to know that you're involved. Otherwise, it's going to be chaos. So, I mean, that's simple.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think you hit it on the head. I mean, I think the industry is changing, and those changes they're happening whether we want them to or not. And can you run them more on the passive side? Yes, you can. But there's more and more people coming in that are running them the way you're running them, and that's who you're competing with. So you just need to be aware of that when you're looking to come into this business. Another segment of the show is called Pro Tips. And that is, what's your best tip for somebody trying to buy their first laundromat?
Yeah, due diligence. You've got to really dig into the numbers. And we did this a lot at Eastern. There's a lot of ways that you can do it. But really, you've got to learn what to look for. You've got to look at a lot of stores. But for somebody looking to buy their first store, the biggest challenge, and I get hit up on social media or on email, how do I verify the revenue? Because verifying the expenses is easy. Every operator that's trying to sell a store, they're going to give you all the expenses, and they're probably going to give you more expenses than you want. So the expense side is easier. Verifying the revenue is more challenging, especially if it's a coin store. But utilize resources that are out there, make contacts, learn the market, and spend, again, it goes back to pro tip, you got to spend time there. When we were looking to buy the store that we had, that we purchased, we spent a lot of time just sitting there and, not even really counting the customers, but looking at what they're spending, looking at if it's they do a lot of drop off store. Like I've looked at a lot of stores to purchase that have a lot of drop off I would go in. The first thing I would do, I'd start looking at the tickets. So the drop off's done. It's on a rack somewhere, or it's in a pile, whatever it is. Looking at the tickets, how old are they? And a good indication of a solid drop off business is stuff that's not sitting there for 5 months.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at the tickets, looking at how old the tickets are, especially on the drop off side, and just spending time and looking at the competition. So, you're looking at a store to buy. Don't just look at that store. What are the two closest competitors? How do they look on a Sunday morning at the same time? Are they doing more business, less business? How do they run? And again, distributors in your market, they all know. I would call a distributor. I'm looking at a Dexter store. I will call, I did this. So the store that I bought, which is a Dexter store, I called the Dexter distributor in my market. I said, hey, Dave, what do you know about this store? That's a great store. We do service on, we sell them parts or whatever it is that they know. And even distributors for other brands, they know what the good stores are. They talk to other operators. They talk to that owner. Making contacts with distributors is a key. I mean, that is a very important aspect in this business. They all know it's a small world, really, and they all know the good stores and they know the dogs. The other thing they know is a new store is coming, because that's the other part of it. Why are you selling your store? What's the reason? And you may not ever get the truth, but sometimes somebody will sell. Hey, I just heard, they're opening a store a block away. I got to sell this store before they open. I got to find somebody that can buy it. So do your homework, learn the market, and make a lot of contacts. I think that's the key for buying a new store.
Yeah. And I will just say from personal experience on that last one of new store coming in, you cannot rely on the distributor or the broker or the seller to tell you a new one is coming in. They could tell you, and that could be a huge benefit to you, but you've also got to go look into it yourself, because that happened to me, and it's like being punched in the gut, sucker punch there. So
no bueno.
Awesome advice for the newbies there. Listen, Stephen, this has been, there's so many just little practical nuggets littered throughout this whole thing. But for me, the biggest sort of contribution here is getting a peek inside how you're thinking about your business and how you're running your business, and the thought process behind all that, and the details that you're organizing into a profitable business. It's been super duper insightful. Whether somebody's listening to this as somebody trying to buy their first one or a seasoned veteran, I think there's something in here for everybody. I've learned a lot just from this last 2 hours that we've been talking. Sorry about that. But 2 hours that we've been talking, genuinely so much good stuff. So I really appreciate you. My last question for you is, if other people are as psyched up about this episode as I am and want to connect up with you or have questions for you, what's the best way that they can get a hold of you?
Sure. Yeah. And I do, I get, I do get a lot of DMs, I get emails, and I do my best to try to, answer questions or help out as best I can. Obviously, I only have a certain amount of time, but I love helping and talking to people that are passionate about the business. And I really feel like it's sort of my responsibility to sort of pay it forward, because I've had a lot of help from a lot of people. So the best way to get in touch with me is my email, which is Stephen, STPHEN, at cleanfreshlaundromat.com. That is the best way to get in touch with me. You could also follow my social media. It's all at Clean Fresh Laundromat, Facebook, Instagram. I don't really deal with any of the other ones, but Facebook and Instagram, Clean Fresh Laundromat, our website, cleanfreshlaundromat.com. Check us out, and it's been fun talking about it. I love talking about laundry. My wife makes fun of me sometimes, because sometimes we go out with another laundry couple, and she's like, can we just not talk about anything related to laundry, washers, locations. Like we could talk about anything else because we love talking about it.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I feel like we're going to have to you've probably at least 3 or 4 times said we could do a whole nother podcast on this, so, I mean, we're gonna have to do a whole nother podcast on 1 or 2 other things, here, because I do feel like we've been on here a long time, but I still feel like we're cutting this thing short because there's so much that I think we could talk about. Not on Snapchat though. Is that what I'm hearing?
No,
you're not over there on Snapchat. Okay.
No,
we'll have links to everything, to your email, to the website, to the socials. We'll have all that on the show notes. So if you want to connect up with Stephen, check out the show notes page. Stephen, once again, dude, you have given so much. You are, even just by coming on here, you're paying it forward in a massive way. So I really appreciate you. And I hope you kill it over there at the excellence presentation that you're giving. I know that you will. Paying it forward even more. And let's stay in touch, man. We gotta do another one of these sometimes because there's a lot more to talk about here.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Hopefully somebody learned something.
Oh, I did. So if nobody else does, which they will, you at least got that. So I appreciate you, man. And looking forward to staying in touch. All right. I hope you loved that episode with Stephen. Incredible stuff. He just gave away so much great information. So huge shout out to Stephen. Thank you for coming on the show. And we're going to have to do more together, of course. But, again, as always, it all means nothing unless you put some stuff into action. So pick one thing, something, no matter where you're at in your journey of laundromat ownership, just getting started, you own 1 or 2, you own dozens. It doesn't matter. Pick something from this episode that you can put into action this week and go put it into action. Again, that action is what is going to help you achieve your goals. So for me, my one sort of piece of action that I want to be taking is I loved that he said, he opened during COVID, and that's just a tough time to take over a business and try to get it up and running. But he said, I saw it as an opportunity to set the standard and to become the standard for his community. And I loved that. And I love that perspective. So for me, as I'm going forward, proactively, I want to be looking at challenges and saying, where are the opportunities here? Yes, the country's shutting down and my revenue is going to drop to, near zero immediately. Where's the opportunity? And for, Stephen, he said, hey, the opportunity is I am going to go out and set the standard. I'm going to take the time that I have now to set things up so that I am head and shoulders above everybody else. So I love that. Again, for you, pick one thing you're going to actively do this week and put into action. Maybe go share it on the forums, laundromatresource.com/forums, over there for some accountability and encouragement, and go interact with somebody else who shared their takeaway this week too. All right. We'll see you next week. Peace.